from secular aspirations to Islamist ascendancy, the initial drift. Bangladesh emerged as an independent nation in 1971. Its foundational principles were secularism, nationalism, socialism, and democracy. The new constitution explicitly separated state and religion, aiming to build an inclusive society. This secular vision was a direct response to the religious nationalism of Pakistan, from which Bangladesh had seceded after a bloody liberation war. The initial years under Sheikh Mujibur Rahman saw attempts to embed these secular ideals deeply into the state's fabric. However, this period was short-lived, and the political landscape began to change dramatically, setting the stage for a gradual yet persistent shift away from its secular moorings and creating openings for religious political narratives. The assassination of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman in August 1975 marked a critical turning point. Subsequent military regimes sought to consolidate their power by appealing to religious sentiments. Constitutional amendments began to chip away at the secular framework. The Fifth Amendment, for instance, inserted Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah the Beneficent, the Merciful, into the preamble of the Constitution. Furthermore, it controversially removed the constitutional ban on religion-based political parties, a move that allowed Islamist groups, many of which had opposed Bangladesh's independence, to re-enter the political arena. This was a significant ideological departure from the nation's birth ethos, fundamentally altering its political trajectory and public discourse. This shift was not merely symbolic, it had profound practical implications. Successive governments, both military and civilian, often found it politically expedient to court Islamist factions for support. The state began to patronize religious institutions and leaders, sometimes selectively, to bolster legitimacy or to counter political opponents. This created an environment where Islamist ideologies could gain traction and visibility. The gradual Islamization of state symbols and rhetoric normalized a closer alignment between religion and politics in the public sphere. This process laid the groundwork for the increased influence of religious groups in subsequent decades, impacting social norms and political competition in ways that the original architects of the nation perhaps never foresaw. The re-emergence of Islamist political parties, such as Jamaat-e-Islami, occurred against this backdrop of changing state ideology. These groups, having been suppressed after 1971 due to their wartime role, found new space to operate and propagate their views. The political vacuum and the quest for legitimacy by non-democratic rulers provided them with an opportunity to regroup and expand their networks. The state's increasing accommodation of religious discourse, coupled with the weakening of secular political forces, contributed to a climate where religious identities started playing a more pronounced role in national politics. This initial drift set a complex precedent, the consequences of which continue to unfold in contemporary Bangladesh, influencing its social cohesion and political stability. The tangled web political patronage and socio-economic catalysts. Political patronage has played an undeniable role in the rise and sustenance of Islamist groups in Bangladesh. Major political parties, including the Awami League and the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, BNP, have at various times formed alliances or sought informal understandings with Islamist outfits to secure votes and consolidate power. This opportunistic engagement has provided these groups with legitimacy and a platform to expand their influence far beyond their organic support base. For instance, coalitions have seen Islamist leaders appointed to significant government positions, allowing them to shape policy and embed their sympathizers within state institutions. Such political expediency has often overshadowed concerns about the long-term implications for secular governance and social pluralism in the country. Socio-economic factors also serve as significant catalysts for radicalization. Widespread poverty, unemployment, especially among the youth, and a pervasive sense of injustice create fertile ground for extremist narratives that promise an alternative, more equitable order. Many vulnerable individuals, feeling disenfranchised by the mainstream political and economic system, may find solace and purpose in radical ideologies. These ideologies often offer simplistic solutions to complex problems, blaming external forces or internal moral decay for societal ills. The lack of economic opportunities and the stark disparities in wealth distribution further exacerbate these grievances, making certain segments of the population more susceptible to recruitment by groups that articulate these frustrations in religious terms. The education system, particularly the dichotomy between mainstream schooling and the madrasa system, also contributes to the complex picture of radicalization. While many madrasas provide essential education and social services to underprivileged children, some institutions, particularly the Qaumi madrasas, which are largely unregulated, have been criticized for curricula that promote narrow, orthodox interpretations of Islam. These institutions sometimes lack subjects like science, modern languages, and critical thinking, potentially limiting the worldview and employment prospects of their graduates. This can create a cohort of young people who are ill-equipped for the modern job market, but deeply schooled in specific religious doctrines, making them receptive to certain Islamist ideologies, as seen with some Qaumi madrasas reportedly becoming pro-Hujibi. Furthermore, perceptions of social injustice, corruption, and a failing governance system contribute to a climate of disillusionment. When people lose faith in state institutions to deliver justice and provide basic services, they may turn to non-state actors, including religious groups that offer alternative forms of social organization and dispute resolution. The slow and often inaccessible formal justice system, for example, can lead individuals to seek out informal, religiously based justice mechanisms promoted by some Islamist groups. This erosion of trust in secular institutions inadvertently strengthens the appeal of those advocating for a state governed by religious law, which they present as a panacea for corruption and inefficiency, a sentiment extremist groups try to capitalize upon. Digital battlegrounds and global echoes, modern drivers of radicalization, transnational ideologies, particularly strains of Salafism and Wahhabism, have exerted a considerable influence on the religious landscape of Bangladesh, gradually shifting local Islamic practices towards more puritanical interpretations. Historically, Bengali Islam was syncretic, blending scriptural tenets with local customs and Sufi traditions. However, increased funding from certain Middle Eastern countries, coupled with the return of migrant workers exposed to these ideologies, facilitated the spread of more rigid doctrines. These transnational narratives often challenge indigenous Islamic practices, labeling them as un-Islamic innovations. This ideological shift has contributed to the growth of religious conservatism and, in some cases, provided fertile ground for extremist interpretations that align with global jihadist movements. The rise of digital platforms has revolutionized the way radical ideas are disseminated and consumed, posing a formidable challenge. The internet, social media, and encrypted messaging applications have become potent tools for extremist groups to propagate their ideologies, recruit new members, and coordinate activities. A study revealed that a staggering 82% of young Bangladeshi militants were radicalized through social networking sites, highlighting the alarming efficacy of online indoctrination. Platforms like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Telegram are extensively used to share propaganda, incite hatred, and distribute materials such as bomb-making manuals, as evidenced by the case of Ansar al-Islam member Nabila, who managed numerous Telegram channels spreading extremist content to thousands. Extremist groups demonstrate considerable sophistication in their online operations, employing a variety of tools to evade surveillance and reach wider audiences. They utilize encrypted messaging apps like WhatsApp and Threema for secure communication, and platforms like Hoop, Element, and the Internet Archive for content dissemination. Online forums and discussion groups, often with names like Struggle for Islam in Bangladesh or Daily Jihadi Newspaper, create echo chambers where radical views are reinforced. Websites such as Jundullah site and YouTube channels run by groups like Jamaatul Mujahideen Bangladesh actively promote violent jihadi ideology, often tailoring content in Bengali to maximize its impact on the local population, including those in border regions. The anonymity and reach offered by the digital realm make it particularly difficult for authorities to counter online radicalization effectively. Extremists use VPNs and Tor browsers to mask their identities and locations, as seen with users like Mohammed bin Qasim, who openly posts radical content. Propaganda is often packaged carefully to bypass automated detection systems, with sermons and lectures translated into local dialects and promoted across multiple platforms. Furthermore, online fundraising platforms and cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are increasingly used for anonymous financial transactions, enabling groups like Ansar al-Islam to fund their operations. The sheer volume and accessibility of radical content online mean that vulnerable individuals, particularly educated urban youth, are constantly exposed to these narratives. The Hydra's heads extremist outfits and state responses in flux. Bangladesh has witnessed the rise and periodic resurgence of various militant Islamist groups, each with its own specific agenda, but often sharing a broader goal of establishing an Islamic state. Groups like Jamaat-ul-Mujahideen Bangladesh, JMB, Ansarullah Bangla Team, ABT, an al-Qaeda affiliate also known as Ansar al-Islam, and Harkat-ul-Jihad al-Islami Bangladesh, HUJB, have been responsible for acts of violence, including attacks on secular bloggers, intellectuals, minorities and foreigners. The August 2024 ouster of Sheikh Hasina's government following a student-led revolution appears to have emboldened many of these elements. Reports indicate that several key militant leaders, including ABT Chief Mufti Jashimuddin Rahmani, were released or escaped custody during this transition. The period following August 2024 has seen a notable increase in the activities of radical Islamic groups. The band Hizb-ut-Tahrir, for instance, openly demanded a caliphate and organized a march for Khilafat in Dhaka on March 7, 2025. There are concerning reports that some advisors within the interim government, headed by Muhammad Yunus, may be supportive of such groups, with a founder member of HUT even being appointed as Home Secretary. Furthermore, JMB is reportedly enhancing its organizational activities and exploring alignments with Hefazat-e-Islami, Bangladesh's largest radical Islamic organization. Jamaat-e-Islami has also visibly reasserted its presence, allegedly exhorting supporters to establish an Islamic state. Government responses to radicalization have varied over the years. Sheikh Hasina's previous government adopted a zero-tolerance policy towards extremism, conducting numerous raids and arrests. However, critics argue that this approach, while suppressing some militant activities, failed to address the underlying drivers of radicalization and may have inadvertently contributed to the emergence of a more conservative younger generation. The current interim government faces immense challenges in tackling this resurgent threat, especially amidst reports of radical elements operating more freely and even gaining some level of official sanction or tacit support. The sighting of a JMB leader with the interim head of government has raised serious concerns. The complex interplay of historical grievances, political opportunism, socio-economic vulnerabilities, educational disparities, transnational ideological influences, and the pervasive reach of digital platforms creates a multifaceted challenge. The recent political upheaval since August 2024 seems to have further complicated the situation, with reports of increased Pakistani influence and attempts by groups like ISI to exploit the instability. Addressing radicalization in Bangladesh requires a comprehensive strategy that goes beyond mere security measures. It necessitates strengthening democratic institutions, ensuring good governance, promoting inclusive economic development, reforming the education sector, countering extremist narratives online and offline, and fostering a tolerant, pluralistic societal ethos, a task made more urgent by the current volatile environment.